for us to be able to deliver this. The Arkansas Center for Data Sciences is a nonprofit organization that's really dedicated to advancing technical skills in the state of Arkansas and matching those skills with the demands of employers across the state, small, medium, and large. This Day in the Life series features, different roles, that people play in the IT profession. Today's event features, as Lisa mentioned, Pam Whitaker. She's founder of East Coast Awakening and Cyber Fly Girls. We're really excited to have her with us today. And I know that the whole title of this role of a drone data wrangler has everybody pretty intrigued. And so I will tell you that as she goes along in our Q&A here, feel free to put your questions into the chat. We'll be opening up for Q&A at the end of the session, but we'll also be looking at that chat to see what these questions look like. So now what we're really here for is the day in the life of a drone data wrangler. So thank you, Pam, for being with us today. And we're going to start with kind of giving you a chance to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, your company, really where you're headed. And then we'll head into some interesting questions that I think everybody's wanting to hear from you. So go ahead, Pam.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate the drone data wrangler thing because I'm originally Texan. So I was like, that is perfect. And I wear my cowboy boots a lot. But just to let everyone know, I've been here in Little Rock for about 9 years now. And I started the business pretty much full time about 6 years ago. And I've done that famous pivot work that some small businesses do. And I centered in on drone technology a couple of years ago. And so involved with drones is everything from security to agriculture to you name it. Anything that an airplane is doing now, a drone can be set up to do, search and rescue. So it's a huge and growing field, and we are very, very much at the beginning of it. So I'm excited. I have I'm going in many directions, and I met Lonnie through Carpenter's Daughters, and I think we're going to talk about that at the end, how the apprenticeship piece has come into play. So.
Yeah, very good. Well, so, we'll probably dance around this, but the real big question that we start with is, what is a typical day in the life of a drone data wrangler, or as you put it, capturing all this data really is only meaningful when you say, what am I going to do with it, right? And exactly. So why don't you describe a little bit of that day in the life, and eventually what we're going to lead to is you telling us about, the attributes, the skills, kind of this variety of things that are a person doing this function, really has to kind of have in their tool belt. So go ahead and describe that for us.
Right. Well, thanks, Lonnie. So just to let you know a little bit more about me and why this is a good fit for me, I went back to school as a single mom to Oklahoma State University and got my software development bachelor's degree. And then I went to work for Lockheed Martin. So I have a software background. I was thrown into a hardware group. So I started working on the infrared pods that hang off of the F-16s. So I got thrown into wiring. Later, I transferred out to the IRS in Washington, D.C. and worked in the data center there. And I did requirements analysis, which has been a really big asset for me. And then I went on to do project management, technical project management, and eventually system engineering, which I loved. And that has all led me to this current offering that I have. And that's just to say, I think one of the questions that you brought up was what happens when you go in and start talking to someone about a drone program? So I think, first of all, people don't really realize what they're getting into. If you want to know the truth, the most recent folks that I went to talk to were involved with, they wanted to do some precision agriculture, do some spraying out in the fields. What they didn't realize that there were waivers involved with that. So the FAA, same folks that protect us on our aircraft and in our airspace, are in control of drone space. And so what has happened with that, it's a growing, ever evolving regulation landscape out there. And so you constantly, as a drone technical person, you need to keep up with that. So you need to find people out there. And I have my original training guy. He's pretty good. He puts out a weekly update on what's going on, you know, what accidents have happened, what has changed in as far as the regulations, you know, how hard is it going to be for a drone person to add this new capability to their drones. You know, the supply chain right now is a huge issue out there for everybody, including drone manufacturers. I was very cautious when I started the drone business because I felt like things were going to change really quick and I didn't want to buy a huge amount of drones. And that was a very good decision because the US has said, okay, we don't want everything coming from China. We want to do our own. And so I think that is a great decision on the part of the US. So as you can tell from all those things I'm talking about, not only is there data, but there's what do we do with that data and what are the implications of that data? So it falls over into privacy and cybersecurity. So there's all the kind of things that surround the data.
You know, Pam, that's extremely helpful because our audience is always interested to know, you know, we combine kind of what we call domain knowledge or soft skills or things or business attributes that you've just referred to, staying current on regulatory items. And, you know, we could go on that list, but it's how that gets coupled with the technical skill that somebody has to possess to say, how do I use the camera, the sensor, the equipment, that what's on that drone? How is it capturing that data? How am I then, you know, pulling that data and putting it into usable form? You know, what are some of those technical kinds of things that when you're looking for somebody to do this function for you, you know, what are they going to get a chance to be exposed to? Do they need AV background? Do they need, you know, network, you know, what background besides then processing data? Tell us a little bit about what you think are some of the more important things that you would expect.
Well, I think I'm really lucky because really what I need is somebody who's interested because I'm capable of training them. Now, if I wasn't in that position, I would probably be looking for, you know, just understanding that things connect. And sometimes things connect in a Wi-Fi, sometimes things connect in a radio frequency, sometimes things connect, you know, how do I move this data from my small little SD card into the cloud and organize it. So understanding organization, workflow, project management is huge. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. I did have, I don't know if you guys, I don't know how close I have to get this where you can see it. Maybe you can't, but anyway, what I like to do when I go into talk to people is just make a picture.
Yep.
That's the easiest way to get across to people what you're doing. This happens to be a very high level remote sensing picture. And I think most of our young people, you know, understand better than we do that those satellites are up there and they're doing stuff up there. And so we need to take advantage of that data. And that is a big new thing. And the more satellites we throw up there, the more information. Now, drones, you just kind of bring that same knowledge set down and it's just closer to home and it's better resolution and you can do it more frequently. But using the data is pretty much the same. So whether you're doing an economic analysis of crop health and you're working for NASA or whoever you're working for, you know, some geography potential, or you're figuring out where to put your retail store, that data can all be captured from remote. And then you can do something forward with that. So yeah, right. Understanding kind of overall what's happening with remote sensing and, you know, security cameras and AI, just a high level view. You don't have to be a surgeon yet, is really, really helpful as you move forward in these fields.
That's perfect, Pam. Exactly what we were looking for. You mentioned geography. And the first thing that always comes to my mind with drones is the fact that they're hovering around a geography, whether that be a narrow geography or larger. As you think about, you mentioned agriculture and farming and a variety of things. How important is it that somebody begins to have a little bit of knowledge around GIS, graphic, geography and information systems as it relates to GIS and analytics around, spatial things. We have a company I'll just mention to you that we work with on apprenticeship, and they got one of those broadband expansion grants, and they were trying to figure out where's the optimal place for a tower. So they were doing a lot of GIS mapping and also trying to figure out, well, here's the perfect place, but oh my gosh, are we going to be able to put a tower where that is? And so they had to have pictures and things. Is that the kind of stuff that your drone activity is able to capture and facilitate those decision processes?
Yes, I'm sure you could utilize it as part of that analysis. Probably, what I start with is, so say for instance, we're doing an economic development piece, which we are working on. I'm working on with Carpenter's Daughters. And I would go to Google Earth and I would look at satellite pictures and I would get as much information as I could from those, as well as some free data that is out there, understanding what data is supplied to all the public for free, and then grabbing that geographic information and then understanding, taking people through a mapping process. Okay, we want to lay out the landscape in this particular area. We're going to, do we want to put a building by this river that's going to overflow? Good question right now, right? Seeing a lot of danger that's occurred because of that. So getting that high level view and then bringing it down to, okay, now let's use the drone to do actual 3D. Now there's these things called surveying and overlapping, and you get that data and you just let the drone fly multiple times and you end up with hundreds of pictures. So then those pictures are run through some algorithms with software, and then that can turn later into a 3D image. Now that area is newly developing. It's changing all the time. It's becoming better and better. So yes, you can use it for land analysis as well as BIM, the building information management, way that people are moving in construction, a way out of paper and a way into designing 3D. All that can come into play, but some of it's new and some of it takes a lot of power. The difference is now we've just got more computer power, right? We've got cloud and we're able to utilize. So it's not that we've got such new techniques. This technique has been known for a while, but now we can just put more data into those and get it quicker. So.
One question, and maybe I won't ask this one yet because I think other people may be very interested in, besides, cameras, you mentioned sensors. Is that related to temperature or, I think of humidity? I don't know if there's other things that are probably weather related that you could get from some other service, but is it at times real-time data on the drone? I mean, what other things do they pull off of the drone as it makes its capture of the variety of data?
Well, I tell people to just look at what dogs are doing out there, because a drone is pretty much, you can hang the same type of sensor that the dog has the capability to do, could be hung on a drone. Also safety factors, sending them in to sniff out, gas explosions or something like that. Anytime we want to protect people, if, you could shoot them along a pipeline, and if there's a certain, like the water departments will put chlorophyll in the pipes, and then they're able to determine leaks. Well, and I've seen them use dogs, and they could also use drones. But I think people need to understand the limitations. There's a timing limitation that people don't understand, that normally drones will fly about 20, 30 minutes. I've got some on my network that'll fly supposedly a couple hours, but people don't know, they don't know that. And so right now there's a lot of human intervention going on till we get some. Now you can tether them. So I guess back to your question, anything that's on an airplane, any kind of sensor that's on an airplane can be on a drone, and anything that we're seeing, the use of animals for a drone could be hung on a drone. So that's the workflow that I kind of go through when I talk to people.
That's great. You had mentioned about what you really look for is people that have an interest and passion. We hear that a lot, and the technical stuff can be taught. Do you think that this is something that people are unaware of? If you were looking to hire, and I know you mentioned based on contracts that could be the case, what are you going to be looking for, and where would you find these folks? Let's talk about where you think you would source this, what kind of background you would have been looking for, and then what they're going to need to be able to do immediately when they step on first day, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I've made my life harder because I specifically started my business and my nonprofit, Cyber Fly Girls, focusing on women in these technical fields. I'm creating a path for women in our technology-driven space. So that makes it harder for me, right? It's not that women can't do it. It's men tend to run to this stuff. I'll go and do a little demo at a school or something, and the boys are running over there. And the girls are watching. They're just as interested, but they're watching from the back. So I kind of wait for them to come around. So it's not that I'm not, and I am trying to use this business as a force for change. So I am making myself it is a little bit more difficult for me to get the people I need. And I have to be able to look at I think we're not looking at enough older people for apprenticeships. I have a young lady right now. She's not young. She's in her 40s and her children are grown. And she's now taking a Security Plus course. So to me, she's a very solid apprenticeship, right? Because she said, okay, I'm done at home now. I'm going to go, learn some technical skills. So I'm open. I need people like you that would kind of funnel them through, because I can't do it all. I just can't. And so Carpenter's Daughters, that's why I tied in with her, because she was focused more on that education piece, and I just want them to flow right in, and then I continue to train them hands-on. I answer that question.
You did, because you actually set the stage for kind of a follow-up question, and I'm hoping that some of the folks in our audience are intrigued by that. Cyber Fly Girls, as the nonprofit that you created, ACDS works with all kinds of organizations that have a very specific focus on certain audiences and people. We call them underrepresented populations, but what it really means is that we haven't reached them with the opportunity in a way that they see themselves in our profession. And that's a real important collaborative step between us with them who want to have a more diverse workforce, and you and others who say, I know where the people are, I know, but there's got to be this connection to the skill building and how they see themselves moving from where they are into our profession and actually being employed as a professional. So you mentioned Carpenter's Daughter. That is an organization that we at ACDS work with. You turn to them, as you said, for kind of getting connected. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, of course, I'm always looking for women out there. What are women doing in the business world? And specifically, I started looking at apprenticeships because I knew there was funding coming out for apprenticeships. And I was like, this is the idea I've always had was, I just want to funnel them in. But I lost a couple people. I started Cyber Fly Girls with 4 women, and 2 of them moved out of state. So it became, I needed more women. So I met Verna online, just through I was like, hey man, I don't understand this apprenticeship at all. I just know that there's people that can get some scholarships, get trained, and I just want them. She has more knowledge in that arena. And so I started talking to her, and now we're planning some projects together, because when you do any kind of new technology, you have to just kind of like build a portfolio one way or another. You got to tell people, hey, I know what I'm doing, so you just do these projects. and just get moving. So she and I are working on a public safety economic development project together.
That's great. Well, one of our attendees has already mentioned in the chat that this is not only exciting, but they're actually thinking about starting a drone and image data and image company in Fayetteville in the early part of next year. So the potential for this to be you as a guide or you guys working together or whatever, that could be very beneficial. And they're thanking you for mentioning the fact that focusing on women doesn't have to just be young, non-college goer, career changer, college graduate folks. It could be older females who may be career changers or looking for that next phase. And we really jointly, I think, are trying to say that some of that is in the message we communicate about the opportunity, about ways in which people advance, especially women, in what has been a male-dominated kind of field. And I think we've gone, to the next level in that with some of our relationships with individual groups, as well as the National Center for Women in IT and so forth. Kind of not a final question, but at least one I want to put out there before we open it up to the audience for additional questions. You've kind of hit on it a little bit, but let me ask you specifically, what advice would you give somebody who's not quite sure about where they might start in our profession? What is it about this that might be not only intriguing to get started, but where it may lead to?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing I show, students or anybody I'm talking to is I talk to them about the sensors on this drone, and the way that it does obstacle avoidance and those kind of things. So the concept of sensors is really where I've always focused, because you can use that in so many areas. If you go into healthcare, there's a ton of sensor stuff going on. If you're in research of some sort, there's all kinds of sensor information going on. So it doesn't really matter where you start. Just, it's just like me. I got thrown into a wiring world and I started with software development. So just be open and listen to, watch where you want to be. I wanted to be a system engineer. I wanted that position. So every step I took got me closer to that position. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, because you mentioned a relationship with agriculture, USDA, whatever, does this become appealing to somebody who's in a rural community that sometimes doesn't see themselves connected to Little Rock or Northwest Arkansas or some major, city kind of environment? Does that become appealing in some ways? Does that advantage them in any way?
Absolutely. I would say as long as they can get bandwidth, and thank God we're putting more bandwidth out there. So yes, absolutely. A young female farmer, you betcha, learning about how to put sensors into her field. And the kid, the folks in those fields now, they're very interested. How do I determine what drought is, impact on me? They definitely need to know. And they're probably the first ones to go buy a drone anyway, are the farmers out there. So the rural community is huge with this. So I'm very focused on it. So I imagine other people are too.
Yeah. Pam, this has been tremendous. And again, with those comments we've seen in the chat, I'm going to open it up now to the audience. And if you want to take yourselves off of mute to be able to ask a question or put it in the chat, either way, we'd love to hear from you. I know there's both interested parties from organization structure out in the communities at large, and there's some candidates that are probably interested as well. So feel free to pose your question. The awkward silence always happens.
Lisa, are you watching the chat? Are you watching the chat? Okay, so you can tell me if there's.
I'll jump in with a question. When you're collecting the data, what software systems do you find to be the best in terms of organizing the data you collect? Do you tend to use the Microsoft Office products, or is there something out there that you like a little bit better?
Well, I'm dealing with a lot of video too. So I do everything from edit videos, edit movies to collapse. So I do a lot of cutting floor data collapsing. So I'll have a dialogue that I want to put images with. So I've learned to do the dialogue and then add the images instead of the other way around. So I learned some techniques in filmmaking that I didn't expect that I would have to know, but I have. So I use some different movie editors. So that's kind of, preference. I'm a Mac user, so I like Mac stuff. As far as the data, there's a difference. So if you're starting to do surveying and capturing, like I said, there's hundreds of clips that are put together through this software. And if you go, if you get into research and university level, you will understand that piece. I mean, that's pretty intense stuff. But like a company like Drone Deploy, you're basically sending that data off somewhere. So you don't have any control over it. And it might take 48 hours to get back. I like Pix4D because I can put it on a local computer and it does all that, creating those images into a big file on my desktop if I have a high enough CPU. So you got to understand a little bit about, what am I dealing with as far as CPU and graphic cards and things like that. So now if you get into, we're doing some training with GPS and ArcGIS is pretty well known. So you can definitely use ArcGIS if you've got it. There are some QGIS, which is it's an open software. And then from those, you learn about, and I listed the other day for Verna, I pulled up all the file types. There were pages and pages of file types. So understanding how to convert those file types, like a DMS file, and put it into a CVS file, CSV file into Excel, even that just basic import export knowledge, that's just really good stuff to know. So no matter what file type I'm dealing with. So I hope that answered your question. Yes, I do use Excel just because it's the go-to for taking those files and converting them into some kind of information that you can deal with. But there are tons of data types to deal with. So that's that. I hope that answered.
Good point. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
you did answer, and you brought up a good point of the data types. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Pam, you opened the door to express or allow us to express that in the midst of the apprenticeship that you referred to, those kind of things about learning in general, about file transfer, about being able to take file types and being able to get conversions and interoperability of hardware, software, and so forth are all covered. We sometimes term that an IT generalist, but it can become very specific, whether that's a network technician, whether that's an AV specialist, a GIS analyst. I mean, we could go down the list of how that works, but the training becomes dictated by exactly what they're going to do on the job for that company like yours, right? So it would be making sure that no stone is left unturned about how they can be productive and successful. And so the training is very targeted and very customized. So yeah. Would you see that as beneficial to you as you bring in one of the cyber fly girls to have them be trained and educated and become an apprentice for you?
Sure, I'm all about it. You send them my way. It's all about it. I love training. I love hands-on. I'm not especially a big fan of me getting in front of hundreds of people, although I do it, but I really like one-to-one. I get a lot of good feedback from one-to-one. So it's kind of my heart, my passion.
That's great. Well, we try to keep this pretty efficient and so forth. And before I just thank you again, Pam, I'm going to open it back up to anybody else that's either from our ACDS team, from the audience, from the candidate pool, anybody else with a question. Susan, thank you for your question, by the way. And does anybody else have anything of interest they'd like to hear from Pam about today?
Just excited to see a couple of things. A, women in the drone industry and the opportunity for women in the drone industry. I think that, you know, it surprises people when they see, I drove through the drive-through the other day, and the gentleman said, "Whose truck are you driving?" And I was like, "Mine." So I like to see that we're changing that culture, and I'm excited to see it. I mean, we've got some candidates in our pool that have, you know, been in the Navy and been in engineering, and they're looking to further their career in this environment in the IT field. So I'm excited to see that change for us.
Great.
Jenny, thank you for that comment. And Lisa, I think we're about at our time, and I know we've been recording this, so we will be sharing this around through all of our different media channels. So Pam, it's going to be available. You'll probably be getting questions, and between you and Verna at Carpenter's Daughter and us, we hope to begin taking some next steps as you win your contracts and begin doing some of this exciting work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet everyone.
Yes. Thank you now. I appreciate everybody being here.